That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
So a big thing at this point of the season is you really have to just look at your own team and you have to go, okay, where am I currently sitting at? Are we 2-5 and every game matters right now? Am I 6-1 and we can just go through and shape our team for the fantasy football playoffs, trying to chase as much long-term upside as possible? And then you can make trades and make your roster constructed in a way that optimizes for your current situation. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm making this video mainly because I am swamped over there on Patreon. If you don't know, over there on Patreon, if you are a part of the flock, you get a Fantasy Flock Network hat. You get your team broken down in a podcast by myself that goes pretty in depth on exactly what I want to be doing for your current situation with your current roster and any adjustments I think we need to be making. You also get our rest of season rankings. You get our dynasty rankings. You can be in a dynasty league with us. I mean, there's so much over there on Patreon. But yeah, we have a ton of podcasts I need to make. So we're going to take a couple of those teams that we would usually break down in a podcast, and I'm actually going to be highlighting them in this video, talking about exactly how I'm going to go through and try to change these rosters from a current 2-5 team to a roster that can possibly be putting up points right away. That way we can stay in the hunt for the fantasy football playoffs. But of course, before we get into it, go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you want to join the flock over there on Patreon, you want me to break down your own team, we'll probably be making videos like this every single week. Go over there, check out Patreon. You can find the link in the description, find that link in the comment section. And down there in the description as well, you can find a link to join Underdog Fantasy, where they have a ton of cool player props. You can get in a draft with us that way as well. All you have to do is go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy, make at least a $10 deposit, and they're going to match any deposit up to $100. So please make sure you go through and take advantage of that. And yeah, I think that should be it. Let's go. Let's pull up this first team. This first team is going to be from Greg, my friend. Thank you so much for deciding to join the flock over there on Patreon. I appreciate it. And let's pull it up. We will go position by position, starting us off at quarterback, where we have Dak Prescott. And going down to the bench, we do not have a backup quarterback. And this is something that I really like to see from pretty much every roster, regardless of if you are a contender, if you are a rebuilder, especially at this point with Dak Prescott, a quarterback coming out of his bye week, where we know this is going to be someone that, based on how productive this Dallas Cowboys offense has been so far this season, he has an incredibly high floor ceiling combination where you are going to be starting him every single week regardless. So there's not that much incentive for you to be wasting another roster spot down there on the bench to bring in a backup quarterback, especially when we have a running back down there on the bench like Saquon Barkley that's already not producing for us. And I know a lot of people go, well, Mason, what happens if my quarterback gets injured? Who the hell cares? It's a one quarterback redraft league. You can go to the waiver wire. You can stream the quarterback position, pick up someone like Tua Tagovailoa from a few weeks ago, pick up someone like Matt Ryan. It doesn't really matter. The position is so damn replaceable that when you're wasting a roster spot down there on the bench on a backup quarterback, really it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're in a situation where, say, you have two streaming options. Say you have someone like Derek Carr and Matt Ryan, and you go, well, Mason, I'm not necessarily that confident with either quarterback here. Why don't I roster two and play the matchups? And in that scenario, hell yes, but you didn't invest that much into a single player to have at the top of your roster. And you can afford to go through and pick up two quarterbacks off the waiver wire and just play the matchups that way. But if we invest into an elite option like Dak Prescott, really love the idea of only having one quarterback on this team. So yeah, let's move on because we're completely fine at QB. And now over at running back, this is honestly where I think we may need to make a trade. So this roster right now is currently sitting at 2-5, and that is a big factor in how we are going to be looking at this running back position, where we have Zach Moss. I will say Zach Moss is like the perfect running back to get at a discount on a 2-5 team. Just knowing that Zach Moss, his next 3 weeks, he's going to be playing the Dolphins, the Jags, and the Jets. You 100% love to have Zach Moss here. Outside of that, we have an injured Saquon Barkley. We have an injured Miles Sanders. And I mean, with Saquon Barkley, this is a running back that I can actually identify as a trade target of ours. I mean, if y'all listen to a podcast over there on Patreon of us breaking down a 6-1 team, you may hear me come out and say, you know what? This seems really good. I think we should be going through. We should be trying to bring in some future production. Let's try to get a bell cow running back at a discount. Let's go try to trade for Saquon Barkley. However, if we are going to be looking at a team that's currently 2-5, it's the exact opposite where we cannot afford to just wait for that long-term value that we may have with Saquon Barkley coming back. We cannot afford to wait for Miles Sanders to come back after his own injury. We need production right now, because it wouldn't even matter if Saquon Barkley comes back 2 weeks from now and Saquon Barkley all of a sudden is someone that is seeing 24 points per game and he's a top 3 running back in fantasy. Because if we lose the next 2 weeks, I'm sorry to say this, if you're playing in a 12-team format where only 6 teams make the playoffs, I mean, if you start off 2-7, you're out of it. It doesn't matter. You'd have to win out from there, and that would be nearly an impossible task. So we're at the position where, with this roster in particular, if it looks like Barkley's going to miss on Monday, which at this point, I think he's probably going to be missing this week. And at the same time, Miles Sanders, we know for sure that he is not playing himself with that ankle injury. It's probably going to be a spot where we need to go through. We need to make a trade to get a better running back coming in that's going to be productive right away. Now, whenever we're going to be making this deal, I think that the play is to trade Devontae Booker and Saquon Barkley in a package to try to get back a productive running back right now. If we can try to package together Barkley and Devontae Booker, so we can try to sell it to the opponent saying, hey, you know what? I mean, you're going to go through, you're going to be getting that 3-down running back regardless, and you will have that plug and play option until Saquon Barkley comes back in. And if we can just try to pivot over for a running back that's in that similar tier, but that's healthy now, I think that'd be a fantastic thing to do. If I'm going to pull up my up-to-date rest of season rankings over there on Patreon, y'all know, a part of the flock on Patreon, I mean, everybody gets our rest of season rankings every single week. And then over there in the same tier of Saquon Barkley, we actually have a couple of running backs like Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift. I think if you can make that trade for any of those running backs by moving off of the combination of Saquon Barkley and Devontae Booker, that'd be fantastic. Of course, if you could go get up to that next tier with Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara, that would be even better, but probably not going to be likely. I mean, I'd be very surprised if you could make that trade. So I think that's a big thing that we have to be doing on this 2-5 roster, is understanding that while, yes, we are selling Barkley at a discount compared to his long-term upside, especially for packaging in with Devontae Booker to cover that production right away, we are at least getting the points in the lineup right now, which is what we desperately need. Now, going over to the wide receiver position, this is going to be a very strong spot on this team where we have Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore at wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. These are both top 10 options rest of season. Really don't need to discuss this that much with both of these wide receivers. But with Tyreek Hill, even with the Kansas City Chiefs being as disappointing as they've been so far this entire year, Tyreek Hill still has managed to be the wide receiver 2 on a points per game basis this fantasy season. And then if you're looking at DJ Moore, well, yeah, I mean, you have to be very concerned about what we have had from Sam Darnold over the past few weeks. Still, the volume's going to be there for DJ Moore. We know that he is a very talented wide receiver, that if you're looking from a macro sense, let me pull it up right now. I can actually tell you that we actually have DJ Moore ranked as our wide receiver 7 in our rest of season rankings. Also going to be a great spot for him this week going up against the Atlanta Falcons. So definitely cannot complain about that at the same time. If you're looking at where DJ Moore has finished so far among wide receivers, on the total standpoint, it's going to be a little bit higher given the fact that he hasn't had his bye week yet. He's actually the wide receiver 8 right now in fantasy points. If you're looking at a points per game, he is down there at wide receiver 14, but he is that low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 that you'd be looking for. Perfect complement to Tyreek Hill. Over in the flex, T. Higgins is someone that I love to go out there and roster, and that with T. Higgins, the volume has been there since he has returned from that shoulder injury. I mean, a lot of people are not necessarily understanding the amount of targets that T. Higgins has had in this offense, where 2 weeks ago, he tied for Jamar Chase in the team lead for targets in Cincinnati. And this past week, he had 15 targets compared to Jamar Chase's 10. Now, of course, I cannot come out here and I cannot say that T. Higgins is a wide receiver that you want over Jamar Chase, as we were saying at the beginning of the season, but clearly that was a horrendous call coming into the year. We definitely fixed that very early on. But nonetheless, with Higgins, it's more so to say this is a wide receiver that you know he should be seeing some progression through the rest of the season. This will be someone that's getting significantly closer to what we had with him in 2020 with a healthy Joe Burrow, where he's a wide receiver 8 on a points per game basis, and games that both Joe Burrow and T. Higgins started in together. And if you're looking at the volume, you should expect the touchdown rate is going to be higher for T. Higgins, as this is someone that's 6'4". So the fact that this is a wide receiver that's had damn near 30 targets over the past 3 weeks, has yet to find the end zone. He's come close a multitude of times. I think that T. Higgins has a very big game coming for him sometime soon. Perfect guy to have in the flex spot. Now, going to the bench, we have some wide receiver depth. I mean, we have Laviska Shenault, Amaro St. Brown. It isn't fantastic. We're definitely going to have to add in another wide receiver from the waiver wire here. I don't necessarily think we can go through and afford to do so through trade. But a big thing that I want to highlight with this team is over there at the tight end position. We are just wasting roster spot after roster spot after roster spot. It doesn't matter if you're 2-5. It doesn't matter if you're 5-2. Every bench spot that you have on your roster is crucial in going through and trying to churn that waiver wire to get the highest ceiling players that you possibly can coming in. I mean, just think about the top performers from this past week in week 7. I'm going to be pulling this up. It's going to be really gross, but let's go to the running back position and let's filter for those week 7 points just so y'all can see how crucial it is to make sure that you're using that bench to the best of your ability. I mean, just at the running back position alone, in week 7, you had Dearness Johnson as the running back 4. You had Brandon Bolden as the running back 6. You had Michael Carter as the running back 7. Khalil Herbert as the running back 8. Myles Gaskin as the running back 9. Kenyon Drake as the running back 12. Elijah Mitchell as the running back 13. Kenneth Gainwell as the running back 15. J.J. Taylor as the running back 17. Devontae Booker as the running back 18. Samaje Perine as the running back 19. Ty Johnson as the running back 20. Devontae Freeman as the running back 21. I mean, of course, you're not expecting this every single week, but it comes to show that those waiver wire running backs, I mean, even at the wide receiver position where you had guys like Dante Pettis popping off this past week, you need to be making sure that you're churning that waiver wire so we can get the next Kadarius Toney off the waiver wire, so you can try to find the next Khalil Herbert off the waiver wire. So whenever we're looking at a tight end position where you're currently rostering Kyle Pitts, Jared Cook, Tyler Conklin, I hate this. I think that if we could get anything in return for the combination Jared Cook and Tyler Conklin, that would be fantastic. In reality, knowing just that people are not that desperate at tight end that they're going to be valuing Tyler Conklin at a high level, you're probably just going to have to go through and cut those 2 tight ends and just bring in some running backs and wide receivers to backfill this depth on this roster. That's something that you're going to have to do, knowing that with Kyle Pitts, I mean, there's no reason to not be starting Kyle Pitts at tight end every single week. It doesn't matter if Kyle Pitts has the worst matchup possible and Tyler Conklin's going up against a defense that just funnels targets to the tight end position. Because here, if you're looking at Kyle Pitts and what we have had as of late, this is a player that had 8 targets, 163 receiving yards, 7 receptions against the Dolphins. The week before that, 9 receptions, 119 receiving yards. The week before that, 9 targets. I mean, clearly you're playing Kyle Pitts over these other tight ends every single week, regardless of matchup. You don't want to be playing a tight end in your flex unless it's George Kittle, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce. I mean, there's no reason to be rostering Jared Cook, Tyler Conklin here when Kyle Pitts is already through his bye week. And at the same time, you're never going to be wanting to play those players in the flex spot. So then just go ahead, drop Jared Cook, drop Tyler Conklin. If we can include them with the Saquon Barkley trade that we were discussing at the beginning of this video, that would be fantastic just as a throw-in piece because obviously you're not getting a lot in return for them. And yeah, I think that should be it for this team breakdown. We'll get into another one right after this. But essentially, I'm thinking that we need to go through, we need to try to trade away Saquon Barkley, Devontae Booker in a package. We need to try to change the construction of our bench where we're going to be dropping those backup level tight ends to bring in more running backs and wide receivers so we have some depth to go through those bye weeks. Okay, so now let's go over to our next roster. This one's going to be coming out from another new member of the flock over there on Patreon. My friend, thank you so much for supporting the channel, Jackson. I'm going to be really excited to look at this team for you. And this is going to be a 3-4 roster, so wins are not going to be as important to get immediately into here as you would find on a team that's 2-5, but still, we definitely need to be going through and we need to be prioritizing getting production in right away. And let's start this off over there at the quarterback position where we have Matthew Stafford and Tua Tagovailoa. And I think Matthew Stafford, based on what we have seen so far from the Los Angeles Rams offense, he is a quarterback that we can rely on being our starting option through the rest of the year. I mean, I would be surprised if you ever decide to go out there and play Tua Tagovailoa over Matthew Stafford. It wouldn't matter if Stafford had the toughest matchup in the NFL. Didn't matter if he was going up against the Buffalo Bills and Tua Tagovailoa is going to go up against the Atlanta Falcons. You're still going to be playing Stafford over Tua. However, unlike Dak Prescott, Stafford has not already gone through his bye week. So I think this will be a spot where I'm fine having that backup quarterback, especially because this is a 12-team league where you also have 7 players down there on the bench. So a lot of teams are going to be rostering 2 quarterbacks. So for that reason, I'm not going to fault anybody for wanting to go through and pick up a backup to Matthew Stafford. A very different situation than what we were saying in the last video with the construction and how deep that team was with Dak Prescott, who was already through his bye week. Now, over there at the running back position, we have a couple of running backs that have been surging as of late. You got James Robinson, Cordell Patterson at running back 1 and running back 2. And I'll say with Patterson, I was a little hesitant to go out there and automatically rank him as a top 12 running back that I know a lot of people wanted us to, until we saw this past week from Mike Davis. Once Mike Davis gets outplayed from Cordell Patterson on snaps for the first week so far this season, and it's coming out of the bye week, clearly Cordell Patterson is the running back that is going to be seeing 70% of the workload in this backfield, and that's all you need for Cordell Patterson. If he is getting at least 60% of the backfield touches, you are going to be incredibly excited, because when Patterson was putting up those monstrous performances earlier in the year, this was a player that was only playing about 35% of the snaps. So if you're going to get that bump up in snaps, I think you have to be very excited about Cordell Patterson. We currently have him as the running back 17 in our rest of season rankings over there on Patreon, so you'll see that he's a mid-running back 2. James Robinson, almost identical to Darrell Henderson with me right now in the usage that they actually have in their offenses, where James Robinson clearly is just completely phased out Carlos Hyde out of Jacksonville. I mean, at this point, Urban Meyer would never be able to go through and give Carlos Hyde 10 carries again, or he would just be laughed off the face of this planet. But nonetheless, I mean, James Robinson, Cordell Patterson, love to have both running backs. Also, both running backs already through their bye week, which is going to be important. And then going down there on the bench, we currently have J.J. Taylor, Javonte Williams. Honestly, with Taylor, this is a running back that you can just go through and cut. I know that this past week he had a decent amount of snaps for the New England Patriots. Now, with Damian Harris, y'all know this is someone that, I mean, we are not a fan of. This is a running back that, I mean, we are really trying to avoid, given the fact that he really doesn't have the passing down role, and it was never going to come close to him in New England. But with J.J. Taylor, this is a running back that this past week, I know he gets 9 carries for 2 rushing touchdowns. It was in a game where the New England Patriots dropped 50 plus points against the New York Jets that they completely boat raced them. I mean, unless it's a deep dynasty format, there's no reason to be rostering Taylor here. I think that if you can just cut J.J. Taylor for really anybody else off the waiver wire, that would be a better play, because I don't really see the upside level play. Even if Damian Harris gets hurt, you're still not starting J.J. Taylor. Like, the only way you're starting J.J. Taylor is if Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson both get injured. And if that's the case, then sure, he's going to be a play that we look at. But for now, I think that there's just no reason to have him on the roster. Now, going over to the wide receiver position, we have DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, both wide receivers that, I mean, obviously always go together, given the fact that they were both drafted in 2018 in the first round. They're always going to be compared through the rest of their NFL careers. And I think we're completely fine rostering both. I know y'all are so damn tired of hearing me talk about Calvin Ridley. And trust me, I'm tired about talking about Calvin Ridley here, but just how we were just nonstop talking about A.J. Brown 3 weeks back when you were buying him at the all-time low point. I think it's very similar here for Calvin Ridley, where yes, he has been disappointing so far this season on a points per game standpoint. Calvin Ridley has actually been the wide receiver 28, so he is a mid wide receiver 3 essentially. But at the end of the day, this is someone that was playing in an offense that really is looking to push the ball down the field. And at the same time, this is someone that's had 52 targets through 5 weeks. So he's averaging about 10.5 targets a game. Last year, he had over 10 yards per target. We know that efficiency is going to be up and down on a week-to-week basis. But as long as the opportunity is there, I'm going to be a believer in Calvin Ridley. Kadarius Toney, I mean, I think Kadarius Toney is going to be a great play this week in particular if we do get Kenny Golladay out of this offense and Toney does play in a plus matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. Down there on the bench with Allen Robinson, Devontae Parker, Henry Ruggs, all these players, I think we do need to be rostering. I mean, Allen Robinson, it's a really tough call in if we should be dropping him in 10-team formats. Just knowing at this point, I mean, even if we get a very strong performance from Allen Robinson this week, I'm still not going to be playing him in week 10, in week 9. So we really definitely need to be just looking at Allen Robinson through a realistic lens and saying, really the only chance that we have him of actually making a real impact in our starting lineup is if you get Allen Robinson in a situation where he's either traded before the deadline, which is very possible, or you actually get Andy Dalton taking over from Justin Fields and this offense being more effective in moving the ball through the air. Regardless, Allen Robinson still someone we have to have on the bench, just like Devontae Parker and Henry Ruggs. I think honestly at the wide receiver position, I'm not going to be looking to change anything here. I think you have enough talent at the top. I think you also have enough depth down below. Now, going over to tight end, this will be a little bit of a different situation. We all know at the beginning of the season, we were saying that Noah Fant was definitely a player that we were wanting to be targeting through trade, just given the fact that there were going to be a ton of targets available in Denver with Jerry Jeudy injured, which honestly has come true. I mean, with Noah Fant so far this season, he's had 49 targets through 7 weeks. So this is someone averaging about 7.5 targets a game. Over the past 2 weeks, I mean, he has been fantastic. He had 11 targets 2 weeks ago, 9 receptions, 97 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown against the Raiders this past week. Not that strong of a performance against the Cleveland Browns. But when Jerry Jeudy's coming back into this offense, I'm going to be a little bit worried about Noah Fant. Now, the problem is exactly what kind of move do we make 2 weeks ago? Whenever you had the blow-up spot for Noah Fant against the Raiders, I was telling everybody to trade Noah Fant for T.J. Hockenson where they could, and I know a lot of people in the flock were able to go through and pick up an injured T.J. Hockenson at a discount and make that long-term play over Noah Fant. Going to be harder to pull that off now. I would say if we're going to be looking to make a trade like that, maybe if we can go through and package together Noah Fant and Henry Ruggs, I think that would be appealing if we could get an upgrade to T.J. Hockenson that way. But outside of that, I think that it is fine. Tommy Tremble at tight end for the Carolina Panthers. I know that he has had some flashes that people want to get excited with, but at the end of the day, this is a tight end that the offense isn't worth betting on. And this is someone that if I had to ask you, hey, I know a lot of people have been talking about Tommy Tremble. How many receiving yards does he have this season? I think a lot of people would go, well, he's gotten the buzz. He's made some flash plays. Does he have 150? This is someone that so far this year has had 54 receiving yards. I mean, this is someone that over the past 4 weeks, this is about the time period where Dan Arnold got traded over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, this is someone that had 54 receiving yards over the past 4 weeks. He's averaging like 10.5 receiving yards a week. I just no upside, no reason to even have him on the roster. I think there are a couple players on the bench that I just don't necessarily understand here. I think we drop J.J. Taylor, we drop Tommy Tremble, we just bring in another running back. And honestly, I mean, especially if we're going to be able to make a play and upgrade at the tight end position through trade, I don't even think that we need to bring in a backup tight end if we're able to get to someone like T.J. Hockenson. So I think that we're probably not going to be making any drastic moves. I think this roster's really constructed well. The issue is just getting these players out on the field actually producing. So I think what we're probably going to be doing is looking to upgrade tight end from Noah Fant, sell Noah Fant high before we get Jerry Jeudy back on the field and taking targets away. We're going to be dropping Tommy Tremble. We're going to be dropping J.J. Taylor, as really there's no reason to even have them on this roster, and looking for better options on the waiver wire. But of course, over there on Patreon, please let me know what options are on the waiver wire. That way we can talk about this a little bit more in depth, and we can try to go through and identify those exact players that you should be picking up. But yeah, I think that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching the channel. I really hope for Jackson and Greg that these breakdowns helped you out at all. And I'm wishing you the best the rest of the season. Thank you so much for joining the flock. And yeah, I think that's all we have. Make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with any questions you may have. And of course, you can join the flock over there on Patreon, get a Fantasy Flock Network hat, get our rest of season rankings, get a podcast breaking down your own fantasy football team by yours truly. And I think that should be it. Use promo code FLOCK and Underdog Fantasy. Check out some player props. And yeah, that's it. Have a great day. And I hope to see y'all with the video or the live stream tonight.